Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast where we talk about things like living more internationally, where we talk about things like creating the life of your dreams, where we interview interesting people doing interesting things in interesting places. My name's Jonathan Lockwood, and we are also with James Guzman, who is still in Chile. How you doing, James?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Doing awesome. So, we have quite a bunch of different types of categories of interview that we have on this program. But one of them, this is going to be very interesting for. Our guest today is named Skinner Layne. He is the founder and chairman of Exosphere, which calls itself a learning and problem-solving community hosting immersive learning programs and experiences. And this is the program that James is in Chile enrolled at this time. And I thought we'd just go right into the bio here. Skinner Layne has founded both successful and failed startups and has raised more than $10 million in early-stage financing, in addition to acting as a private equity advisor to multiple energy projects in excess of $100 million, and has established formal relationships with global energy funds. He's previously been an enterprise Web 2.0 consultant to NASDAQ companies and was, at the age of 23, the youngest person to sit on the board of directors of a Sarbanes-Oxley compliant publicly traded company in the United States. Skinner is a former speechwriter and senior strategist to U.S. Senator John Boozman. Welcome, Skinner Layne, to the Borderless Podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So, Skinner, where are you from? Tell us.
Well, I'm originally from Bentonville, Arkansas, which is a very interesting place to be from. And I lived there for the bulk of my life. I spent a couple of years in Texas, and for the last 7.5 years, I've been down here in Chile.
Wow, that's a good long time you've been there. Great. And so what was your path toward there? What were you doing leading up to the time that you got to Chile?
Well, I started out life, as you sort of alluded to, in politics. And, politics is sort of, as the joke goes, a lot like watching sausage being made. Once you've seen it done once, you don't really want anything to do with it again. And so I decided that politics was probably not the most fruitful way for me to spend my life. I thought that it was a less effective way of bringing about the kinds of changes I wanted to see in the world. And so I saw technology and entrepreneurship as a better path to achieve that. So when I finished university, I moved to Texas and started to get involved in software startups. And then my path kind of weaved in and out of software and finance in both the U.S. and after I got to Chile. After my stint in politics, I've never held a real job, and so that's been 10 years of harsh reality about what it really means to be self-reliant and to bootstrap life before, during, and after failure, and being willing to get back up on the horse after it, throws you off and then stomps you into the ground.
Right.
Well, I think it's funny is, Skinner, you seem to have a pretty similar story to mine as far as 2008. It took kind of a large life experience for you to really wake up to a lot of things that you didn't realize in the past. I know, at least for me, when when the market crashed and I lost all my real estate company, and that was when I really started looking at the global financial system and figuring out what was really going on. And that was when I sold everything and I went to Madrid. And you did something similar. You made a lot of money earlier in your life, and I don't know how exactly that worked out, but I know that you had a kind of a wake-up call as well at that same point in time, and then you sold everything that wouldn't fit in a suitcase, and you came down here to Chile. So
yeah, I was fortunate that back in the 90s, even though I was pretty young, I was paying attention to the startup boom, the original .com bubble, and I remember I remember that during those years, I heard a lot of talk about the new economy and how the fundamental nature of the economy had changed. And when the yield curve inverted during the dot-com bubble, or right before it burst, I remember them saying, oh, this time it's different. The inverted yield curve isn't going to portend a recession. And then, of course, the bubble burst and things went kind of badly. Well, I remember, sometime around 2006, 2007, when the yield curve began to invert again, I heard the same kind of commentary from the U.S. financial punditry. And I said, I think that this is probably history repeating itself. And so I sold everything I had, closed down everything I was doing in the States, and left, a number of months before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And I came to Chile. So it's something where I detected that maybe the most important pattern in life is when people deny that the general rules of history will keep being true. They tend to be fooled. And so I really do buy into Warren Buffett's maxim that you should be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy. And so right now, I kind of see a similar situation building up in the so-called unicorn market of high-tech startups in the States. And I think that we're probably on our way to another kind of day of reckoning. I don't know if it will be more or less severe than Lehman Brothers, but I do think it's going to be a pretty unpleasant period sometime in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that also similarly, I changed when this happened to me in 2008 and it shook up my world. I had, the realization that I had is that I had to change my strategy. The strategy that I was told that I need, the path that I needed to follow was no longer going to work. And this is what actually it took for me to break that,
right,
that I had. And you put it pretty well in one of the speeches that you gave here at Exosphere. And you're saying that the strategy for prospering in the fall of Rome was a completely different strategy that it took to prosper during the reign of Rome. Right. And so I think that's very much kind of my outlook, and what those are the types of strategies that we try to put forth here on Borderless. So are there any specific strategies maybe that you can think of that people need to, reassess if they want to be entrepreneurial in today's world?
Sure. I think that the first thing to observe is that particularly in the free market libertarian community, I think that a lot of people have fetishized the idea of the collapse, as if the collapse will sort of inaugurate a new utopia. And I think that this is really foolish thinking. For one, I think that it's foolish because genuine collapses rarely produce utopias. They usually produce really violent and unpleasant periods. But the second and perhaps more important reason that I think it's foolish is that the collapse itself is a myth. The problem with the idea, the more overarching problem with the idea of the collapse is the idea that it will happen all at once, that it will be tractable to all intelligent observers. And this is just not what actually happens when large systems collapse. And if we use Rome as our example, you can't point to a particular point in time when the Roman Empire fell in a certain meaningful sense. I mean, at some level, if you consider Byzantium to be the continuation of the Roman Empire, but seated not in Rome, the Roman Empire continued, for another millennia after what we consider to be the Roman Empire collapsed. And so the fact that you can't observe exactly when it collapsed means that people at the time might have seen evidence that the prior assumptions of operating within the Roman Empire were not really true, but there was still enough plausible deniability that some people were still operating under those old rules. And so there were still some incentives to do so. And I think that that's really, like, if we talk about a realistic scenario of collapse, we're looking at one where the rules won't change overnight. They'll just become less and less clear to participants in every side of the market. So when I say that the strategies for profiting in the collapse of Rome are different from the height of Rome, what I mean is that it's probably really advantageous to look for smaller sorts of opportunities that do not rely on traditional forms of financial markets in order to grow and prosper. And I think that trading is a really good example of this. So if we look at the post-Rome scenario of economic growth in Europe, the next most important period is probably the beginnings of the Italian Renaissance. And so the Venetian Republic is a really good historical example of how to look at the world post-Rome. And so the Venetian Republic specialized in trading, particularly in maritime trade. So they said, let's just make money buying and selling and moving things around because we happen to be really good at making boats and at doing this seafaring thing. So the maritime power of Venice and of the other maritime Italian city-states was in deep specialization, extreme knowledge of market, rather than rapid expansion and broad scope. So in a market, in a sort of Roman market, you want to get out to the largest market possible. In a Venetian scenario, you want to get the highest margin possible on a sort of discrete trading mission, because there's no guarantee of the next trading mission. So, one of the things that I think is a good way of seeing this world is that there are a lot of people who have made a lot of money in Rome, or who have made what to them is a lot of money in Rome, and they want to preserve or grow that capital. And there are a lot of young people who no longer have the ability to make any money under the normal Roman life scripts and are hungry for opportunities to make money some other way. And so, again, I think the Venetian Republic is instructive to us because in the Venetian trading missions, the way it worked was that somebody who already had money would put up capital, literally finance a trading mission, and they would partner with a young entrepreneur who didn't have much money, and they would usually split the rewards about 2/3 to 1/3, where the young entrepreneur actually went on the boat, made sure that the trading mission got to its destination, made sure that the product got to the end customer, made sure that the money and the boat made it back to Venice, and that the financier got paid out. And in return for that, they would usually get to keep around 1/3 of the net profits. And so this created a very inclusive set of institutions that generated a lot of wealth over time and expanded the total number of people who could then further invest in trading missions. So this created a virtuous cycle that was very wealth generative for the Venetian Republic. Now, that system eventually started to break down when the people who had the money started requiring a sort of registry of individuals who were basically inside the country club already, and they could only do business with each other. And that was the beginning of the fall of the Venetian Republic, in at least its economic ascendancy. So, I think that in civil society, one of the best things that people who embrace the ideas of liberty and freedom can do is create and foster these inclusive economic institutions through private trade. So I think this is a really good model for people who maybe they're in their 50s or 60s or even a little bit older that still want to be kind of active in business life, who know a lot about the nuts and bolts of running a business day to day, who have the skills and wisdom to know how to avoid the big mistakes, to back and foster the young, youthful energy of aspiring entrepreneurs who want to put in the sweat equity to make their life different. And so these are the sort of relationships that I think have deep roots in human behavior, and they tend to make a lot of logical sense as well. So I think that they're really worth reviving as an institution, and I think that I think that people who are generally looking at the world in a different way are the right people to revive such an institution. So I also see another important thing to note is that in the Venetian Republic, it was really much more of a true meritocracy, where merit was proven by action and not by credential. And so I also think that with your theme of being borderless, I think that a lot of these sort of partnerships should also be borderless. And I think that there are probably a lot of successful business people, entrepreneurs, and professionals from the U.S. who could benefit a lot from partnering with a young, aspiring entrepreneur from a place like Latin America, just as an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's one of the things that I love about listening to Skinner speak is you say a lot of things that I've always kind of thought to myself, maybe I haven't said aloud. One of the things, like we were just talking about, with the kind of this doomsday scenario of the economy falling apart, being scare tactic on the libertarians, and you also mentioned that it's kind of like the global warming of the libertarians, and this, and I very much agree with that. There's all these people that have a story of how everything is going to completely fall apart, and I just think that although you can make a rational case for that sometimes, even if it is true, it's not a good attitude to have, to be very pessimistic about the future, because you never know, maybe you're wrong about that. And by you having that negative attitude, having that pessimistic attitude, it's going to put you in a state of, you're just going to be conserving rather than producing, rather than innovating, rather than going out and risking things and stuff like that. And that's really how we grow, isn't it? And
right. So. Well, and I think that pessimism and optimism are two sides of the same coin. Both of them assume knowledge about a future state of affairs that we simply don't know, because the future is indeterminate. So being optimistic about the future doesn't really do anybody any good. And being overly pessimistic about the future doesn't either. I think that being moderately pessimistic, or rather just skeptical of any future claims, is a pretty pragmatic way to see the world, and probably positions one to pay attention to the details, which is where all real money is made. I think that one of the bigger fallacies in the startup or entrepreneurial world today is the idea that big ideas make money. It's usually small ideas that make money replicated over a whole bunch of applications or iterations of the same product or service. So looking out for the next big thing, whether that's an optimistic sort of Silicon Valley techno-utopian worldview, or a hyper-pessimistic global collapse, Galty kind of worldview, I think neither of them position a person to genuinely profit.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that has a lot to do with what you call the accounting. And when you talk about accounting, it doesn't necessarily have to do with what everybody thinks of as accounting, tax accounting, like we just had a webinar about accounting, but the accounting of your life and of the deficits that you might have in your life. And I thought that it's a very useful term that you use there. So maybe you can explain about how a lot of these startups do not have good accounting and how you can apply good accounting to your life to take a look at what you're doing wrong.
Well, yes, accounting is one of my favorite subjects, and it's probably a strange thing for somebody to enjoy talking about, but I see accounting as a greater metaphor for a lot of things in life. So we're not just talking about doing your bookkeeping and paying your taxes in the right way kind of accounting, but literally understanding that a debit on one side has to be a credit on another side. The meaning and power behind double entry accounting, I think, can be applied to a number of things in life and business beyond just dollars and cents. And so, I mean, at a really basic level, the idea of entrepreneurship or startups as these things that should get really big as fast as possible, and even if they have to consume a whole bunch of capital, and the hope of getting a huge payday without ever really bothering to stop and make revenue, is a business that is almost guaranteed to fail because it simply doesn't do the accounting at a meta level. And this is, I mean, this is in a sense like a Roman startup model. The Roman Empire expanded not by being good at science, not by understanding nature, not by figuring out ways to reduce costs, but by building a lot of infrastructure, more or less forcibly getting people to use that infrastructure, taxing them for it, and continuing the expansion in the hopes that they didn't run out of places to expand to. And this is really not dissimilar from the way that Google, Facebook, Amazon, Uber operate. They are large infrastructure plays. Just, you could think of them as the Roman roads. They more or less force people to use them because they are the better forms of infrastructure compared to the other options out there. And then they levy a tax. In the case of Facebook and Google, the tax comes in the form of advertising and in being spied on. So it's not a financial tax, but it's a tax on your freedom and on your privacy. And so this model, of course, can only sustain so many companies. You could only have so many empires building roads before people say, well, we just don't need any more roads. So if this is the way people want to approach startups, then you would almost be as well off buying a lottery ticket. And statistically, anybody who is just basically good at math would know that this is never going to pay out. So I think that by doing the accounting of things from the beginning, by understanding how means turn into ends, and by monitoring them at every step along the way, entrepreneurs can position themselves for the slow wealth creation that has been the hallmark of almost all wealth creation in history. The Warren Buffett model more than the Mark Zuckerberg model. If I had to put my money on which one would work if replicated 100 times over, every single time I'd put my money on Warren Buffett.
Point taken. We're talking with Skinner Layne on the Borderless Podcast. We'll return in just a moment. We need to give some attention to our sponsor. Today's Borderless Podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group. So, although our weird buddies at the Condescending Group are still looking for a Portland, Oregon venue for Global Condescension 2016, they're going ahead with some of the planned events, and what everyone's excited about is what they're calling the Compassion Slam. Here, some of the world's most self-loathing individuals will each have 3 minutes and 20 seconds on stage to do something, anything, that proves that they care more than the others. Previous compassion slams have included people simply reciting humanitarian poetry or singing songs about compassion, but things have really intensified in recent years, with soulless, misguided persons desperate to show the world that they are more kind than the rest, burning all of their possessions on stage, beating themselves over the head with frying pans while denouncing their own white privilege. And two highly emotional young ladies actually had a cry down in which test tubes were glued to their eyes, and they both cried for the starving children of their favorite impoverished nation, while wet nurses measured the levels of their respective tear counts. One thing's clear: our condescending group friends and their followers really want others to believe they care more. Thus the slogan, the Condescending Group, we care more than you. And all that. We're back to the Borderless podcast, talking with Skinner Layne, founder and chairman of Exosphere. We've been having a very interesting discussion about the way things may or may not play out in future, and I find myself harmonizing very well with him. His idea that people try to fetishize this grand collapse, I think, is very, very true. I was saying earlier, the idea that there's going to be this time when John Galt is going to deliver a speech, and people will then quake in their boots, and they will know that everything that he said, and maybe that we might advance in our lives, is true. And then they will set about, fixing their lives in the way that we all agree is correct. That is something unlikely to happen. I don't believe it's going to happen. And he offers some very good ideas about how one should proceed into the future if one has an interest in entrepreneurship. One of the things I noticed on your site that I found very interesting, I thought we could just touch on this a bit, talking about discovering what one's nature is, a reference to Ralph Waldo Emerson's how he supposes no man can violate his nature. And you talk about how there came a time that you had to learn how to be Skinner and be okay with that. Realize the brutal truth that most achievement-driven people spend their life running away from something, denying, denouncing. So how did this work out in your life? How long did it take you to come to that truth?
Well, I'm not sure that I've come to it yet. I mean, I think that it's a very difficult and ongoing process. One of the concepts that we like to talk about at Exosphere is the idea of the infinite game. And the definition of the infinite game comes to us from a guy named James Carse in a book called Finite and Infinite Games. And Carse defines a finite game as a game that is played for the purpose of bringing play to an end, declaring a winner and a loser. And then the winner, of course, gets their prize or whatever, and the loser sort of goes home sad. And he contrasts this with the idea of the infinite game, which is played with the sole purpose of continuing to play. And I think that in the process of self-discovery, it's very much an infinite game. And any time you might think you've reached an end, it's just an illusion or laziness rearing its ugly head, Like you think, okay, finally now I've understood all there is to understand about me. And so now I have a perfect model of myself and can go through life accordingly. I think this is either illusion or laziness, or both. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So in my case, what I would say is that getting to the point where or just getting to the road to perpetual self-discovery, that took about 10 years of adult life, of meeting with the problems and pains of living in an adult world and having to solve adult problems. And I think that the idea of adulthood is one that is very scary to people who are my generation or younger. And I think this actually comes because adulthood was offensive to most of the people in the baby boomer generation. So they avoided adulthood completely because they thought it was offensive. And so then the whole notion of it became scary to their children. And so we live in this really strange world where it's been like 2 generations since we had any adults. And this is kind of scary to me because being willing to meet and confront the problems and pains of life, which is the way that Scott Peck defines discipline, is not the kind of life that I would say is happy-go-lucky. I think in the end it turns out to be joyful. I think that it turns out to be fulfilling and rewarding. But the kind of fulfilling and rewarding that you get after, a long day of really exhaustive labor at doing something that matters to you, that kind of fulfilling, not a day of, surfing, which may be enjoyable, but not fulfilling in the same way as having, lifted a finger to do real work and then looking back at the day and saying, wow, that was a job well done. I'm glad that I lived that day. And so I think that this process of becoming an adult is this sort of universal vocation of humans. I think that people are called to many different specific vocations. And those specific vocations may be to be a husband or a wife, to be a father or a mother, to be an entrepreneur, or to be a second in command, or to be a good marketer or a good artist. I think that there are lots of specific callings that people have, but I think that the one general calling that we all have that most people just don't bother answering is the calling to full adulthood. And again, it's not one that we can actually ever reach. It's only one that we can keep answering or trying to answer. And in the process of continually trying to answer it, we become better at all of those other specific callings. So, it may seem self-evident or tautological that a better adult makes a better father. But I actually feel like we need to say that out loud. And I mean, it's kind of depressing, but I really do think that we have to say those kind of things out loud. Mm-hmm. So I think that the last 10 years has been my process of coming to realize that being intelligent or, being observant or being clever in business, none of those things are equal to being a good adult. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been a central part of my own self-discovery and development in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and a lot of what we're doing here at Exosphere, I think, has a lot to do with that as well. And I wanted to talk about Exosphere. We have done a few things. We've talked a little bit about Exosphere. We had Gabriel Scheer on. We also I had a post that I put out about a month ago that was talking about Exosphere. Also, we had Luke Blackburn on about a year ago. So I've been following you guys for a while, and for people that are not really familiar with Exosphere, not sure what it is, maybe you can explain when you started it and your vision for it and what you have going on down here.
Sure. I mean, we describe Exosphere as a learning and problem-solving community, and it's a sort of vague description because to define Exosphere in the mode of a traditional company would be wrong, because we have certain profit motives, of course, in different areas of our operation, but we aren't really a company in the traditional sense, and we aren't really an organization of civil society in the traditional sense. But what we're trying to do is create a new category of institution, and the first and foremost goal of Exosphere is to help people live richer, more fulfilled lives by confronting reality, by solving problems, by learning how to solve other people's problems, which is the way that I kind of define entrepreneurship, and understanding themselves as a mechanism for being able to then better understand the world. So this has different manifestations depending on the context. So I guess what we're really trying to create is the world's first infinite game institution.
All right. I noticed on the Exosphere website, there is a kind of a bullet point here that says, in a world full of people and organizations selling answers, we are trying to become the first institution built on asking questions.
Yes. The idea of asking good questions. This is really inherent to the life mission of one of my heroes, Socrates, whose whole life was basically going around and asking people really difficult questions, asking people the right questions to get them thinking. And, as we strive to be an infinite game institution, nothing is more finite or final than answers. And so it's not that we say there are no answers. It's simply that we say whatever answers we have are just the best we can do so far, but there are probably better answers if we keep asking the right questions. And so it means continuing to develop, hone, and iterate theories that serve as the answers we have so far, but without trying to bring them into some finality that we can say, okay, these are the answers for forever.
Yeah. So down here at Exosphere, we have a number of people with this. You're calling it a boot camp, startup lab type of thing. Mm-hmm. Now you have several of these that you do a year, and they're different ones have different themes. And so, what would you say if somebody might be thinking that it might be for them, might be for their son or their daughter or grandkid or something? What would you say? Who is Exosphere for? What type of person and what type of things specifically are they going to learn while they're here?
Sure. One of the things that would be a mistake would be to sort of box in, who this is for in traditional terms of demographics. We of all the things that we're most proud of, I think one of them is the extreme diversity of the people who have come through and participated in our programs and joined our community. So people of all ages, from teenagers all the way up to retired people. We have had, men and women from over 40 countries in the world coming here, speaking all manner of different languages and so forth. So Exosphere is really for a particular kind of person that is irrespective of demographic. I would say that in a sense, like the target, the kind of people who benefit most from Exosphere conform to a psychograph rather than demograph, if that makes sense. And that psychograph, I would say, are people who are generally curious about the world, open to challenge, and willing to interact with people who are radically diverse from themselves. And I think that anybody who has those three characteristics will thrive and learn a lot in the Exosphere environment, whether they come here to learn how to build a startup, to become better at sales and business development, to learn a skill like coding or design, whatever it is. If they have those three things, then they would benefit from being a part of the community, and they would be a benefit to all of the other people in our community.
Mm-hmm. But just to give people an idea, within the last week, what have we had? We've had Oculus Rift in the office, my first time ever using virtual reality. That was cool. We had a 3D printer. We had the Borderless logo printed out on a 3D printer. We've got a drone in there. We had a guy that was decelerate. I don't even know how to say it.
Decellurizing.
Okay, that's what it is. Decellularizing a heart. It's
horse heart. Not a human heart. Not a human heart.
So all kinds of things, very futuristic. A lot of people talking about, that are knowledgeable about the future and talking about how these things might be used. So a lot of stuff on Bitcoin, blockchain. So a lot of very interesting type of discussions. If people are, if that sparks your interest, then this is a place you might want to check out. And not only that, but we're here, Reñaca, Chile, Viña del Mar, and beautiful place, great weather. It's certainly not a bad place to come to study for a little while. And there's also a lot of things that are going on in Chile in general with entrepreneurship. They have Startup Chile and some other things like that. And how would you say, as far as the entrepreneurial spirit in general, between Santiago and here, how would you, for somebody that might be thinking about coming down here?
Well, I think that Latin America is generally a very good place to be for anybody that would like to be an entrepreneur today. If you look at the demographics of Latin America, I think that the region is positioned about where the U.S. was in the 1950s in terms of middle-class consumer spending power and all of the potential, all of the growth opportunity of the U.S. from 1950 to present is just now being unlocked in Latin America right now. And so that's a pretty exciting thing just in and of itself. But then you consider that in terms of size, there are more than twice as many people living in Latin America than live in the U.S. So really quantifying the vastness of this opportunity is something that I think people should consider. And Chile is, in so many regards, a good place to take advantage of the Latin American environment. It's a very safe place to live. So people coming from the U.S. who might have some safety concerns about Latin America, may have some preconceptions about what it's like to live in Latin America. You'll find that if you come to Chile, it's very different than what you imagine. The police here are very non-corrupt, which is not something you can say for most of the countries of Latin America. And as a result, like the large institutions here function pretty well. And at the same time, there are lots and lots of opportunities to fix a lot of the small problems that exist here as well. So I think that in that regard, Chile and Latin America are really good to consider. Startup Chile is an example of the Chilean government's effort to create a thriving startup ecosystem here in Chile. And it's really succeeded in attracting a lot of people to the country, in putting Chile on the map. And I think that now we really see that Latin America can contend in the startup ecosystem globally. I think that it still has to kind of get its own legs. It has to figure out its own niche in the global marketplace. But those are actually opportunities for really brilliant entrepreneurs to identify those opportunities and bring their own creative solutions to carve out those niches.
Yeah, and I've been having a great time here. I've not had as much time as I would have liked to go to Santiago, but I definitely will be going once we're finished with the boot camp here. I'm going to go check out Santiago, see what's going on there. There seems to be a lot of I have a lot of listeners of the podcast that are down there, live there, and went to show me around. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these co-working spaces and other entrepreneurial things that they have going on down here. And so that's what we're about here. With the Borderless podcast is giving people solutions. And so that's what we're doing. We're giving you real information here that you can use. This is us. We're down here in Chile right now. There is a institution that will give you an alternative to the classic university, or I'm sorry, not the classic, but the standard university system that we have today. I think many of our listeners, either they don't want to go, or maybe they would like to recommend something else to, whether it's their children or somebody that they know. Well, here you've got another option, and it's a wonderful place down here. It's great weather. It's certainly not a bad place to be, and you're right on the beach, and you're learning all these wonderful things that the Skinner is teaching you. And we also have a lot of, like I was saying, technology that people that come in with all new technology, with the 3D printers and Bitcoin and all these types of different startups that come and all these types of discussions. So the next one that you guys have is coming up, I believe, July, right?
Actually, there's one in March.
Yeah, so we actually have a one-week program called Phoenix that is coming along in March. So it's just a week after the end of Hydra 3, which is going on right now. And that program is for people who probably aren't ready yet to commit to a longer experience, but who are considering some changes in their life, want to be around other people who are kind of in a similar situation, and want to engage with some ideas that might help them begin paving a path for a different life. Then we have our next Hydra program coming up in July, and it will be overlapping with the first 3-week program that we've ever run in sales and business development called Maverick. So there are a lot of ways for people to participate in the next few months, if any of this sounds like it's up their alley. So I would encourage you to go onto our website, check out Phoenix, Maverick, and Hydra 4. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you. We have a really friendly staff here who be delighted to learn more about you, your situation, and see if one of these experiences might be able to help you along in your own journey.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of early bird thing going on for Hydra 4 right now?
Yeah, so if you sign up right now, you would be able to get a pretty significant discount to the normal price. So the deadline for that is coming up pretty soon. So go into the website and check out the application form and let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, and as a listener to the Borderless podcast, if you go in there and you put in that you heard about Exosphere to the Borderless podcast, then we're also going to give you the membership to the Borderless Society. So that's now also I've just recently I'm changing it from, rather than a yearly subscription, just lifetime subscription. So if you join this, you want to come on board with Hydra 3 or Hydra 4 or one of the week-long programs, then you'll also get a lifetime membership to the Borderless Society. So that means you'll come down here. Somebody will, they'll get the whole foundation and motivation they need to get started, all the network through Exosphere, our network. You're going to be able to meet Skinner in person. You'll be able to meet me in person, and the whole Exosphere crew down here. You'll be able to see Chile, and also the very large network that we have with the Borderless Society. It's the Facebook group, the forums, the course that I've put together on living and doing business internationally. So, I mean, this is a great deal, especially for someone that's thinking about kind of on the fence about going to college or what they want to do next in life. Maybe they need some direction. They want to meet some like-minded people. Well, I can't think of a better option than what we've put together here. So, we can talk about these things and we can bring you all this stuff, but we really need you to, if this is what you want to do, at some point you have to go ahead and take the step yourself. We need you to go out there and I don't think it's too much to ask. The price that you guys are offering for, you have great accommodation here right close to the beach, pretty much in a vacation spot, and you're getting this one-of-a-kind education. And plus, we're throwing in the Borderless Society membership. So, yeah, if you want to do this, then please go to the website and do that. You'll get a discount. You'll also get the free membership. So, really encourage you to do that. And we'll put some links to that in the show notes. Now, Skinner, we do ask everybody that comes on the podcast one question, and that is, if somebody is in that situation, if they're a young person that wants to be entrepreneurial, maybe they want to leave their home country and do some different things, more borderless lifestyle. Out of all the advice that you give, what do you think is the single best piece of advice that you could give someone in that situation?
Well, if you're genuinely thinking about starting over in life, I suggest that you do the accounting beforehand. Understand the cost of what you're getting into. Understand that it's not going to be easy. That if you're looking for a solution to your problems, this is probably not it. This is not a solution to problems. It is an embrace of new problems. And it will bring you a lot of joy. It will bring you a lot of challenge. And if you've already really thought it through and been sure that that's what you want, then you can meet any of the problems that come your way. But you should think about it before you get started. I think that the caution and calculation on the front end save you, or they rather keep you motivated throughout the entirety of the process. And when you come out on the other side, I think that you'll be surprised at just how much you were capable of that you didn't know you were capable of before.
All right. Thank you for that advice. And Skinner Layne, founder and chairman of Exosphere, thank you for being our guest this week on the Borderless Podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hey, folks, remember, if you give us a rating and a review on iTunes, we will read that on the air if that's of interest to you. Thanks so much. Another Borderless Podcast will be coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.